About to share, but I can't stop thinking about it. My name is Avery. I'm 34 years old and I've been married to my husband, Logan, for 8 years. We have 2 kids, Isla, who's 6, and Miles, who just turned 4. Logan works a lot. He's in construction and he's a good dad, a good husband too, or at least he was, until I decided to ruin everything by acting on pure impulse. It started when I got a Facebook message from Liam. You know how everyone has that one person they think about when they hear the roar of the one who got away. For me, that's Liam. We dated, or I thought we did, during college in Virginia. He was charming, had that perfect laugh, and always seemed just out of reach. Looking back, he mostly used me for money, and I knew it, but I let it slide because I thought I loved him. When I saw his name pop up on my phone, I froze. My first thought was, why now? I opened the message. It was short. Hey Avery, it's been a while. I could really use a friend right now. I should have ignored it, I know that, but something in me, call it curiosity, call it old feelings, call it stupidity, answered him. What's wrong? I wrote back. He told me his wife had left him, took the kids and moved in with her sister in Atlanta. He said he was a wreck. Didn't know what to do. My heart broke for him, or at least that's what I told myself. The truth is, it was exciting. After all these years, he thought of me. I convinced myself it was innocent and asked if he wanted to talk. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was packing an overnight bag. I told Logan that Liam, an old friend from college, was going through a tough time and needed someone to be there for him. Logan didn't say much at first, just stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Finally, he asked, why you? Doesn't he have anyone else? It was a fair question, but instead of answering, I got defensive. It's not a big deal, Logan. He's just a friend. Logan shook his head. You're really going to leave me with the kids all weekend to play therapist to some guy you barely talk about? That stung, but I didn't let it show. I do the same for any of your friends if they needed help, I said, which was a lie. I don't even like most of Logan's friends. Logan didn't fight me on it. He just sighed and sighed. Do whatever you want, Avery. That should have been my first red flag. But instead, I packed my bag and drove 2 hours to Liam's place. When I got there, he looked broken. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled. He hugged me like I was his lifeline. And for a second, I felt like I was 21 again, like he was the same Liam who could make me laugh until I cried. We stayed up talking late into the night. He told me all about his wife, how she'd never appreciated him, how she'd given up on their marriage. I should have seen through it. It was classic Liam, always playing the victim, but I ate it up. At one point, he looked at me and said, You've always been so kind, Avery. I don't know what I'd do without you. I'm ashamed to admit how good that felt. Logan hasn't said anything like that to me in years. When I got home Sunday night, Logan was waiting for me. The kids were already asleep. I could tell he was upset, but I acted like everything was fine. How was your weekend? I asked, as if I hadn't just abandoned him and the kids. He didn't answer right away, just stared at me with that same look he gave me before I left. Finally, he said, You know, Avery, I'm not stupid. That caught me off guard. What's that supposed to mean? You really expect me to believe you went all the way there, just to talk, he said. His voice was calm, but I could tell he was angry. I laughed it off like it was absurd. Logan, come on, you're being ridiculous. But he didn't back down. Am I? You've been distant for months, Avery. And then this guy shows up out of nowhere and you drop everything for him. How do you think that looks? I felt my stomach drop, but I refused to admit anything. You're reading too much into this. Liam needed a friend, that's all. Logan shook his head. No, Avery, he didn't need a friend, he needed you. And you went running like a lovesick teenager. That hit a nerve. I was just being nice. Why are you making this into something it's not? Logan laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that makes you feel good. You really don't get it, do you? You left your family to play savior for a guy who didn't even care about you back then. What does that say about us? That was the moment I should have apologized. But instead, I said something I'll regret forever. Maybe if you paid a little more attention to me, I wouldn't have to find it somewhere else. Logan just stared at me like I'd slapped him, then he walked away without another word. The silence after Logan walked away was unbearable. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, trying to convince myself that I hadn't just blown up my marriage in one careless moment. But the truth was, gnawing at me, I'd crossed a line and I knew it. Still, I wasn't ready to admit I was wrong. The next morning, Logan barely spoke to me. He got the kids ready for school and left without saying goodbye. I wanted to blame him for being cold, for shutting me out. But deep down, I knew he had every right to be upset. By noon, I was pacing the kitchen, replaying the argument in my head. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Liam. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. His message read. I felt a mix of emotions, guilt, excitement, and something else I couldn't quite put my finger on. I wanted to tell him everything, to unload my feelings on someone who seemed to understand me. But I stopped myself. Instead, I typed, thanks for checking in. Everything's fine. It wasn't fine, of course. By the time Logan came home that evening, I was a nervous wreck. I tried to distract myself by cleaning, but all I could think about was the way he'd looked at me the night before, like he didn't know who I was anymore. Dinner was tense. The kids were chattering away about their day, completely oblivious to the storm brewing between their parents. Logan barely said a word, just nodded and murmured responses when the kids asked him something. After we put them to bed, I decided to try and smooth things over. Logan, I said, leaning against the doorway of our bedroom, can we talk? He looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. What's there to talk about? I hesitated. About last night. I shouldn't have said what I said. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the best I could manage without fully admitting I was wrong. Logan sighed and set his phone down. You don't get it, Avery. It's not just about what you said. It's about everything. The way you dropped everything for that guy, the way you brushed me off like I didn't matter. Do you even see how messed up that is? I felt my defenses rising. I was just trying to help a friend. Logan, why are you making this a bigger deal than it needs to be? Because it is a big deal, he snapped, his voice finally breaking. You didn't even think about how this would affect me or the kids or our marriage. You just did what you wanted, like you always do. That hit a nerve. That's not fair, I shot back. I've done plenty for this family. I put my life on hold to raise these kids while you're out working all the time, and now you're acting like I'm the bad guy because I wanted to help someone who was there for me when I needed it. Logan stared at me, his jaw tight. Liam wasn't there for you, Avery. He used you. And now he's doing it again, and you're too blind to see it. I felt the sting of his words, but I wasn't ready to admit he might be right. You don't know him like I do, I said, my voice shaking. Logan laughed a bit early. No, but I know you. And I know you've never been good at seeing people for who they really are. I didn't know how to respond to that. The truth was, part of me had already started to question why I'd gone to Liam's place. In the first place, was it really to help him? Or was it because I liked the way he made me feel like I was important, like I mattered? The argument ended with Logan walking out of the room. He didn't slam the door or yell, he just left, and somehow that felt worse. The next few days were a blur. Logan was distant but polite, like he'd put up some kind of wall between us. I hated it, but I didn't know how to fix it. Meanwhile, Liam kept texting me. He'd send little messages asking how I was doing or thanking me for being there for him. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just being a good friend, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing with fire. Then one evening, Logan finally broke the silence. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, pretending to watch TV, when he turned to me and said, Avery, do you even want to be in this marriage anymore? The question caught me off guard. Of course I do, I said quickly. He didn't look convinced, because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you're more interested in chasing some fantasy from your past than building a future with me. And the kids, his words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I couldn't find the right words. I need to know where your head's at, he continued, because I can't keep doing this, wondering if I'm enough for you, if you even respect me. I froze when Logan said that. My instinct was to push back, to defend myself, to blame him, but something about the way he looked at me, tired, worn down, made me hesitate. Logan, it's not like that, I said, finally. My voice cracked, and I hated how weak I sounded. I respect you, I really do. He raised an eyebrow, his skepticism cutting deeper than any words could. Do you? Because running off to spend a weekend with a guy who used you, lying to my face about it, and acting like I'm the problem, doesn't scream respect to me. Logan, I didn't lie, I snapped, the anger bubbling up before I could stop it. I told you where I was going. You told me the bare minimum. He shot back, his voice rising, and you didn't even care how it made me feel. Do you have any idea what it was like sitting here with the kids, knowing you'd rather be with him? I flinched at the venom in his tone. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? He demanded, leaning forward, his eyes locked on mine, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you'd drop everything for this guy while treating me like an afterthought. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. He wasn't wrong, and that realization hit me like a freight train. Logan, I just wanted to help him, I stammered, but even as I said it, I knew how hollow it sounded. You wanted to help him, he repeated, shaking his head. What about me, Avery? What about us? Do we even matter to you anymore? The way he said it, like he genuinely believed I didn't care, made my chest tighten. Of course you matter to me. You and the kids are my whole life. Then start acting like it, he said coldly. His words stung, but instead of apologizing, I lashed out, "You know what, Logan? Maybe if you didn't spend every waking minute working or zoning out in front of the TV, I wouldn't feel so." "So what?" he interrupted, his voice dangerously low. "Unloved, unseen as spare me, Avery. I'm out there busting my ass to give you and the kids a good life, while you're off chasing some pipe dream with a guy who didn't even stick around long enough to buy you dinner back in college. That was too much. How dare you throw that in my face?" I snapped. "You have no idea what I went through back then. And whose fault is that?" he shot back. "You don't tell me anything, Avery. You keep everything bottled up, and when it explodes, it's always somehow my fault." I didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't wrong, but I couldn't admit it. Not now, not when I felt so cornered. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I crossed my arms and stared at the floor. Too stubborn to apologize, but too ashamed to keep fighting. Finally, Logan stood up and walked toward the door. "I'm going out," he said without looking back. "Where are you going?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. "Anywhere but here," he said flatly, and then he was gone. I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying the fight in my head. I wanted to blame him for leaving, for not understanding me. But the truth was gnawing at me. I'd pushed him to this point. Later that night, as I was lying in bed, my phone buzzed. It was Liam again. "Hope you're doing okay," his message read. Without thinking, I typed back, "Not really, Logan and I had a fight." His reply came almost instantly. "I'm sorry to hear that. Want to talk about it?" I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to confide in him, to feel that connection again. But another part, the part that was starting to realize just how much damage I'd done, knew it would only make things worse. Before I could decide, the bedroom door creaked open, and Logan walked in. His face was calm, but his eyes were tired. Like he'd aged 10 years in the few hours he'd been gone. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but firm. I nodded, my heart pounding. He sat down on the edge of the bed, keeping his distance. "Avery, I need to know the truth. Do you have feelings for him?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to say no, to deny it, to reassure him that he was the only one for me. But the words wouldn't come. "Avery," he said again, his voice sharper this time. "Do you love him?" I froze. The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. And I could feel Logan waiting, watching, hoping I'd say the one thing he needed to hear. But I couldn't lie, not convincingly, anyway. "Logan," I started, my voice shaky. "It's not that simple." His face fell, and the silence between us grew heavier. "It should be simple, Avery," he said, his voice low and tight. "You're my wife. This should be the easiest question in the world." I looked away, focusing on the floor instead of the heartbreak in his eyes. "I care about you, Logan. I really do. But, he interrupted, his voice breaking. "But I don't think I love you the way you want me to," I admitted. The words spilling out before I could stop them, the room went still. Logan sat back, blinking like he'd just been slapped. "Wow," he said finally, letting out a bitter laugh. "I guess I got my answer." "It's not that I don't love you at all," I said quickly, scrambling to soften the blow. "I just ... I don't know if I ever loved you the way I was supposed to." Logan's jaw clenched and his hands balled into fists. What does that even mean, Avery? What the hell are you saying? I hesitated, my mind racing. When we got together, things were complicated. You were stable, dependable, and I needed that. But you weren't. I wasn't what? He demanded, his voice rising. I wasn't your first choice. Is that what you're trying to say? I swallowed hard, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. Logan, you knew I had baggage. You knew I wasn't over Liam when we started dating. And I thought we worked through that. He shouted, standing up and pacing the room. I thought we built something real. Was I just some consolation prize to you? I winced at the raw pain in his voice. It wasn't like that, I said weakly. But even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Then what was it like, Avery? He demanded, his voice cracking. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I was your safe option. The guy you settled for because the one you really wanted didn't want you. I couldn't deny it, not entirely. The truth was, Logan had always been my third choice. Liam had been my first, my wild, passionate fling who made me feel alive. When that didn't work out, there was someone else. A guy named Ryan, who had swept me off my feet but disappeared when things got serious. And then there was Logan, sweet, dependable Logan, who offered me stability when my life was falling apart. I didn't mean for it to be like this, I said softly, tears welling in my eyes. That's your excuse, he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. You didn't mean for it to be like this, that's all you've got. I didn't ask for Liam to come back into my life, I said defensively. But you invited him in, Logan shot back. You let him stay there, in your head, in your heart, even when you knew it would hurt me. I didn't know how to respond to that. He was right. But admitting it felt like too much. I think you should go, he said suddenly, his voice flat. What? I asked, stunned. I can't do this anymore, Avery, he said, his eyes red, but determined. You don't love me. Not really. And I deserve better than being someone's backup plan. Logan, please, I begged, reaching for him. But he stepped back, out of my reach. No, he said firmly, you've made your choice. Whether you realize it or not, and it's not me. I felt my chest tighten, panic rising as the reality of the situation hit me. What about the kids? I asked, grasping at straws. They deserve parents who respect each other, he said, and right now, that's not us. As he walked out of the room, I felt a wave of emotions. Anger, sadness, guilt, but the strongest was a strange sense of relief. It was over. I picked up my phone and stared at Liam's last message. I wanted to text him, to tell him everything, but I hesitated. For the first time, I wondered if I was making a mistake. Logan came back that night. I didn't expect it, after everything. I thought he'd finally had enough. But there he was, standing in the doorway of our bedroom. His shoulders slumped as if carrying a weight I didn't understand. I thought about it, he said quietly, his eyes avoiding mine. And I've decided. I can forgive you. Avery, I didn't know how to react. Part of me was relieved. But another part, one I couldn't admit even to myself, felt something darker. I didn't deserve his forgiveness, not after everything. Logan, I started, my voice faltering. But he held up his hand to stop me. I'm not doing this for you, he said, his voice low and tired. I'm doing it for the kids, for what we had. Maybe I'm a fool, but I don't want them to grow up in a broken home. His words stung, but not in the way I expected. There was a part of me that almost wanted to cry, to feel bad about what I had done. But the guilt. It was so easy to shove aside. I won't do it again, Logan, I said. But even as the words left my lips, I felt the hollow weight of them. The truth was, I'd already done it, but I wasn't about to admit that, not to him, not to anyone. Logan wrapped his arms around me, holding me like he hadn't just found out the truth. Like he hadn't just figured out that I was the one who had hurt him. I let him. Even though a small part of me knew I'd already crossed a line that would never be erased, I let him believe I was still the same wife. The one who loved him, who cared, but the reality was, I wasn't. The affair with Liam, it hadn't been a one-time thing. It hadn't even been about Liam, it was about me. Me, trying to prove something to myself, something I wasn't ready to admit. Logan was a good man, he was loyal, steady, dependable. And maybe that was the problem, he was my third choice. I didn't love him the way I should have, but I needed him. And that was enough to make me keep pretending. He'd never know what really happened, I'd take it to my grave. But as I lay there in his arms, I realized something. He would never be enough, not really. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how many times he forgave me, I would always want something else. And Logan, my sweet, unsuspecting husband, would always be the one who believed in me. He would always be the one who wanted to fix things, to make everything right. But he couldn't, not anymore. As he drifted off to sleep beside me, his breathing soft and steady, I closed my eyes and thought about Liam, about how it had felt to be with him again. And I knew, deep down, that no matter what I told Logan, no matter how much I promised to make things right, I would always be looking for something more. But I would never let Logan find out. And that, in the end, was the worst betrayal of all. It would be my secret, forever. Thank you for listening until the end. Every story holds a piece of someone's truth, and maybe a piece of your own. If this touched you in any way, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. See you in the next video.